I'm Thomas Mumford, Vice President of Exploration at Scottie Resources. We are a Canadian-based exploration company exploring in the Golden Triangle of BC. We're focused on high-grade gold around a past-producing gold mine, and we're finding new discoveries in and around that historic asset.
Thomas, thank you for the introduction. Nice to meet you. Scottie Resources, I confess I'm relatively new to the story, but I know a little bit about the Golden Triangle. And when I looked at your website and your presentation and your kind of marketing materials, I was kind of impressed by the gold grade. So absolutely, it's really nice to see those chunky gold grades there. But to set the scene, could you first of all, could you produce a map just to kind of, so that I can orientate myself, just kind of understand where you are in the Golden Triangle? And I noticed one of the things that came up in the presentation was that you talk about infrastructure changing or infrastructure is improving. So if you could just mention kind of some of the changes that are underway and how that might affect your geography, that'd be really useful.
Yeah, so we're in the Golden Triangle of BC, very prospective, very mining-rich jurisdiction, but it's long been held as a difficult area to work, and that's largely because of the infrastructure in the area. If you look at other top-tier mining jurisdictions in the world, like the Abitibi, South Africa, you've got all this built-up infrastructure, and so the bar to have a deposit be economic is so much lower for those when you have a mill just down the road, when you have a power line, when you have a road. When you're looking at Scottie Resources up in the Golden Triangle, one of the big things for us relative to our peers in the Golden Triangle is the amount of infrastructure that is in and around it. And that's just a function of the amount of mining that's been going on in the Golden Triangle over the last 40 or 50 years, and the number of projects that have developed from a pure exploration discovery to a mine, to going back in and even looking at tailings on some of these things. Like we're at that peak and that part of the infrastructure cycle on a lot of these projects. And
so that national highway, is that a National Highway 37 there that I can see kind of coming up through that map?
Yeah, provincial highway for BC. Yeah, it goes all the way. That would be the Alaskan highway that goes all the way up to Alaska through BC.
And is that a year-round road? Can you drive that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes.
And below Premier and kind of south of Scotty through Premier, is that a waterway that I can see there? Is that used, or is that just
that's the Stewart Canal, or the Portland Canal that attaches up to Stewart. So Stewart is just south of Premier. Premier is one of the historic mine. It's being reactivated right now by SCOT Resources, and historically it was one of the largest gold producers in North America.
Okay, and so how do you get your stuff into? How do you get your drill rigs? How do you support your camp? When you talk about infrastructure, are you heli supported, or do you drive in, or do you boat in, or what's the route?
I'll just go into a zoomed in map here at the southern end of this Golden Triangle here. This is our land package here on the right side of the screen. You've got Scotty in yellow. You've got Ascot in this lighter gray, and then green, you've got Newcrest, who just recently bought Pretium's Brucejack mine. So they entirely bought out that company for $3.5 billion. But if you're looking at infrastructure here, you've got that Portland Canal that goes right up to the town of Stewart, and that's about 40 kilometers south of us. There is two companies currently shipping concentrate out of the Port of Stewart. So you've got Newcrest, two deposits. So you've got Newcrest now owns Brucejack, so they're shipping a high-grade gold concentrate out of there. And then Newcrest also has the Red Chris mine, and they're shipping a copper concentrate out of Stewart as well.
So the Brucejack gold con, does that go out on a boat?
Yes. Yeah.
And when you say that Port of Stewart is 40 k's south of you, does that mean, and because you've got three license areas, one to the immediate northeast of Port of Stewart, one to the south, and the one which actually says Scottie Gold, which that's presumably that's the 40 kilometers to the north.
Yeah, so Scottie Gold up here that's what I'm referring to, the actual historic Scottie Gold mine, which is where most of our exploration is in around there, within 10 kilometers of the historic Scottie Gold mine. We do grassroots greenfields exploration on the other terrain that we have, but most of our drilling is focused up here at Scottie, and that's where most of our dollars go. And there is a road that goes from the Port of Stewart all the way up to our camp. Historically, there was a mill just 2 kilometers north of where we're working right now, and that was for the Grand Duke mine over here. So this was an all-season road. So this was used all year round to access the mine back in the early 80s.
And is it still all season? I mean, can you run a winter campaign if you want to?
If you wanted to, you could still run a winter campaign. We don't spend the money to plow the road at this point. We operate during the summer only, just to keep the cost per meter drill down.
Yeah. And what's the kind of rainfall area? Kind of annual rainfall is there? Is it a couple of meters?
Oh, it's very high precipitation area. Yeah, very high. I don't know what the actual numbers would be, but there's tens of feet of snow in the winter.
Okay. Geologically speaking, what is this area characterized by?
There's a number of very prominent north-south structures throughout the area that host a lot of the gold and copper deposits. And so there's a number of these features. You've got the SK Rift in the area as well, which was synonymous with the historic SK mine, one of the highest grade gold mines ever to operate. So we are on one of these major north-south structures, and we're in Jurassic age rocks largely.
So Jurassic age rocks, Scottie Gold, it was just looking through your presentation, it seems as if it was kind of small scale mining, narrow vein, kind of going in on a number of little portholes, almost kind of following their nose, kind of mining. Oh yeah, mining just ahead of themselves, or kind of defining just ahead of their development. What took you back in there? And sorry, I haven't even done the kind of introduction. You know, how did you come to join the company, and you know, what's your association with it been?
Yeah, I mean, for a number of years, I've been working in the Canadian exploration industry all across Canada. When I finished my PhD, I actually joined BCIT, which is a British Columbia Institute of Technology, and I was an instructor, and then I became the program head. And then we developed a mining engineering program. But part of that institute was that there was no research component to it. So I had my summers largely free to go out and do exploration for various companies across Canada. And I was doing that for a number of years, 7 or 8 years. I was kind of going and looking at, you know, greenfields to brownfield sites, major drill programs to, you know, putting the first hole in the ground, or just doing ground truthing. And so I got to see a lot of rocks across the country. And you know, my last year before I joined Scotty, I was doing some rope access work in one of these projects. And then I was just down the road from another company that was starting up a relog program. So they were looking at historic core in a mine. And I was just kind of sent in there to get these a number of geologists ready to go and to make sure they were looking at the right things in the rocks and categorizing, characterizing, and sampling. And that project ended up being Scottie Gold. And I went in, it was just a camp. There was like 4 or 5 of us. The CEO was the cook at the time. So Brad, who's the CEO now, is still the cook sometimes, but I went in, met Brad, really liked the geology. It was a small tenure, but it had an easy story. Just to the south of us, Ascot was, you know, refurbishing and getting ready to reactivate an old mill. We were sitting on a historic brownfields high-grade gold mine that had never been properly explored. And you kind of mentioned it. It was something where they found the vein at surface and started mining it, and they just kind of poked along. And when I look back at the the historic drilling data, the historic sampling, and the fact that the glaciers in the area had massive retreats since the early 80s when this actually operated, I saw an easy upside on, okay, well, we can advance this, we can add that. You know, they've never drilled out here. It's obviously continuation. So there was an easy story for me to see geologically. And so I became, pretty invested in the company, and eventually quit my job and joined full time. And that was about 5 years ago.
Okay. So, and when did sorry, I should know this, but when did the company, I see that the first drill hole was drilled in 2019. That's right. You kind of drilled 600 meters in 2019. So obviously, if you were out, so 5 years ago, we're in kind of 2017, you got on board. So you were involved in that early drill program. You drilled what it was,
just 2,000 meters. Just 2,000 in total that year. And 600 was at that blueberry target that you're probably referring to.
Oh, okay. And that you got that great intersection, whatever it was, 35 meters at 7 grams a ton.
Yeah.
7.4. Let's not forget the 0.4.
Yeah. And that was a bit of a surprise to us, to be honest. We had a 2,000 meter drill program. It was very end of the season. Gold hit a technical moment there, and we said, okay, well, we're going to go for it. It looked like gold was going to go for it. It was, I think, just over 1,400 an ounce after sitting at through 1350 for a long time. And we launched it in like 10 days. We had our drill targets picked out well in advance, but we were focusing on grassroots greenfield stuff, kind of looking for other signs and symptoms around the area. And we went in and drilled this 2,000-meter drill program. And the last hole of the year was the one that hit really big at Blueberry. I'll just bring up a slide there, just to kind of put that into context.
Yeah, please do. And what did you, apart from the gold grade, what was the geology that you were intersecting?
Yeah, so the geology was, there's a vein that outcrops at surface right here, and that was a historic vein that was known about. And now the geology at Scotty itself, while it's high-grade veins, they're a little bit unique in character. They're pyrrhotite, pyrite-rich veins, very steeply dipping. They've got quartz carbonate shear vein bands within them, and that's where the gold grade really seems to punch above its grade. And we're getting hundreds of grams per ton in some of these zones. There's a vein that was very similar that outcrops at surface and just off the road, and that was called the Blueberry vein historically. And it strikes to the northeast. It dips a little bit more moderately to the northwest. And it had seen a few drill holes, but it was only drilled down to about 40 meters depth. So we went in and we were saying, how far does this vein extend? And just seeing at the size of this one vein. And so we drilled this hole targeting at a depth of about 100 meters. But in advance of hitting that vein, we hit that big wide zone of moderate grade, high grade mineralization, and just didn't really understand it because the rocks that we were sampling didn't look all that sexy. Didn't look like something we would normally sample at surface relative to what the mineralization was characterized for the veins itself and known historically.
So sorry, just to get my head around this. So that the yellow trace on the surface, that's the outcrop of a distinctive vein, which is subvertical.
No, and this one is dips into the northwest.
So it dips into the northwest, and as it dips underneath your drill pad, you were expecting to hit it at a downhole depth of 100 or something, 100.
Yeah,
and yet above that, you hit a zone which was very well mineralized, but didn't look juicy to your eye.
Exactly. Yeah. So the vein itself is pyrrhotite pyrite. It's a massive sulfide vein. And where we are drilling it at surface, it's about 4 meters wide. It's a very obvious structure. And it doesn't have a lot of alteration around the margins because we can see these things at surface. What we hit was this very black zone. It's hosted in an andesite here, really intense chloritization. We've got disseminated pyrrhotite and pyrite in there. And the zone held together very well. It's not like we have a couple really high grade zones and we're just smearing it out over that. The grade holds really well across that entire interval.
And is that a new type of target for this area? I mean,
it was for us. So we, at first we didn't really understand what we come into. We had an inclination that there was a north-south structure there. And so when we went back in the next year, because we had drilled this the last hole of the year, we didn't get the results back until December. Like 3 or 4 months later. This was kind of when the lab started backing up. So we went in the following year and we drilled in and around that to try to understand it, not targeting that vein anymore, but trying to see if there was something else that was causing the mineralization. And so when we did that, we had quite a bit of success, both mapping at the surface and surface sampling, as well as the drilling. And we found there was a north-south structure there. So you can see that we drilled to the south of the vein, we drilled to the north of the vein. And when I show a long section in a minute, you can see that we actually follow a plunge line down there, or an apparent plunge line at least. And then at surface, we started mapping out high-grade surface samples along a north-south conduit, which this is basically in line with the valley bottom. So there's a lot of synergies with the regional structures in the area as well.
Okay, because that the trace of the vein at surface, or the outcrop of the vein at surface, is not directly north-south. It might be oblique, it might be a secondary structure.
Exactly.
But you're effectively saying that the mineralization appears to be better correlated with the regional structure north-south.
Yeah, and so when we went in, we drilled these holes, we were able to kind of build a geological model about what was causing the mineralization. And what we found is right in the middle of this, there's a contact between an andesite on the left and a siltstone on the right. And so if you map out that contact, you can actually test that as the mineralizing the primary control feature on this structure. And that's what we did. We basically mapped out that contact and then said, let's drill it along strike to see if it holds together, see if that's the main controlling feature. And so the obvious targets were up where the road is, where if there's a north-south structure, let's drill it off the road where we can actually pinpoint where those contacts are. And we also had some...
So sorry, just to interrupt, is that contact a structural contact?
It's lithological contact.
It's just a lithological contact, but sub-parallel to the major regional structures. So it could be structural.
Yeah, I mean, we see jogs on it, but it does look like a lithological contact where we actually see it in core. Like it does look like a natural transition from an andesite, pyroclastic andesite package into a siltstone. And then we go into andesitic layers outside of that as well. So it does look like it's continuous package.
And does the mineralization, the fluids kind of, is that driven by kind of rheological or competency contrast between the two rocks?
That's the model we're following right now, is that this contrast between these two lithologies is what's, at least limiting the mineralization and causing it to form there. We get about 80% of the grade in the andesite and about 20% extends into the siltstone. And so when we mapped out that contact, which is this dashed yellow line here, we went in and drilled it. So this is the third campaign, basically. So this is kind of annual progressions here. So that was the first hole in 2019. We did 2020. This year we went in and we drilled off the road right to start up to the north and then to the south. And then we had some historic, basically we could see the rocks here. There was some historic workings at the surface up here. So we drilled in here as well. And then we focused on that middle zone as well. And I mean, the grades held together fantastic. We're well away from the blueberry vein. We could show the mineralization was related to this contact. Yeah. And now we've got a huge amount of running room on this system.
That's top left intersection, 35 grams over 12 meters. I mean, that's a stonking intercept, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's like 25 meters from surface as well. And you're just off of that road that goes down to the Port of Stewart. And on the way to Port of Stewart, you have to drive by Ascot's mill. So it just kind of highlights the infrastructure in the area and the accessibility of this potential ore.
So if I go onto the right-hand side, you can see that the third one up from the bottom is 15.3 grams per ton gold over 13.49 meters.
Yeah, so I'd like to show you that long section.
That's at the bottom of the hole. And is that in the siltstone?
Yeah, that would be in the siltstone, exactly. Yeah. So, and if we look at a long section of these grades, so this is the north end over on the right or the left-hand side, and the south on the right. Mm-hmm. We're looking at it to the east here. That hit is down here. That was our deepest hit that we've drilled so far to date. So that's at about 225 meters from surface to hit that zone. We haven't drilled anything deeper than that. This is entirely open at depth. And you can see these apparent plunge lines with the model contour model here. And it's largely just based on our drill density and drilling to date. We haven't drilled in these large green areas. We've been following what we think was an intersection lineation at surface and kind of projecting it down, and success begets success. So, you keep hitting, you might as well keep following it. I think we're at the point now that when we go in this year, we will be drilling these voids. And one of the reasons there's voids in the drill data is at surface, there's till coverage. So we just didn't see anything at surface, where in these other areas, we actually had surface control. So we were able to pin exactly where the contact was, continue it down. Now we have the evidence to connect these zones and then push it down as well.
The median width.
The median width, I haven't actually calculated it out, but I mean, we're in. But
do you kind of think? Do you consider this to be kind of a 5 meter thick structure, or kind of between 2 and 15, or?
When I'm kind of doing my back of the envelope calculations about how big this is, I usually use like a 30 gram meter hit as an average median kind of conservative hit, which is, like 5 meters at 6 grams would be equivalent grades for that kind of gram meter hit. And as far as strike length on this, so we've drilled it out to about 720 meters at this point. But we can trace that contact hundreds and hundreds of meters to the south. And to the north, we've got 10 or 100 meters before we hit a fault that will offset it. And we know where the offset is, and we're kind of targeting that as well. But to the south, we've got 400 meters before we basically, we lose the geology under the lake bed, the historic lake bed that's, covered in sediments, but it's actually drained. So you can actually drill on the lake bed itself.
From surface, you mentioned till cover, you mentioned lake bed sediments, and there's a cross-cutting fault a few tens of meters to the north. Did you say tens of meters or
tens to 100? I don't know exactly where it is because it's under a bit of a package of till.
Okay. What tools have you got to map the geology, either through cover or at surface? How much outcrop is there? Does the geochemistry help? Does the geophysics help? What are your handles?
Yeah, I mean, till's not working very well for geochemical signatures to go through it. It's kind of a late blanket that kind of obscures that. So we've been using geophysics and just regional structures to tie that in. In terms of geophysics, we've done 3D IP over top of this target. We've done airborne EM, airborne mag, and I think we're looking at like ground-based EM this year as well to kind of advance it. But so far, at least to identify the competency contrast between the andesite and the siltstone, 3D IP works really well at identifying that contact.
And it doesn't get distracted by all of the pyrrhotite and the pyrites that seems, it's a sulfur-rich system. You've got a lot of metal there.
Yeah.
Is it not just kind of Christmas lights and fairy lights all over the place, and you just don't know where you are?
No, because the mineralization that we see along the contact isn't that rich in sulfides. It's the veins that are oblique to it, like the blueberry vein, that are very rich, and they're quite small relative to the rest of the scale of this. So 4 meters wide versus something that's kilometer long. They don't really obscure it, and just the regional footprint of the andesite against the siltstone, we're able to see that contrast in the IP data.
Do you have a kind of a resistivity signal as well? Are the siltstones more resistive than the andesites, or is it?
Yes.
It's particularly down to the IP that the
it's a bit of both between the chargeability and the resistivity. We can kind of come up with a signature to differentiate the two units.
Okay. Do you have mag over it? Have you got ground mag? And
we don't have ground mag. We have airborne mag over top of the area.
Does that help, or is it too wide spaced?
Yeah, it's too. There's a lot of magnetite in the andesite itself, and so we're able to get regional structures out of it, and we're able to get dike events out of it as well. But it doesn't seem to correlate well with mineralization.
Where does this contact sit relative to kind of one of these regional north-south structures? Is it
right in the middle of one?
Oh yeah.
yeah.
So it's plumbing system and everything. It's all right there.
Yes. Yeah. And like in terms of a heat engine and a fluid source, we've got the Summit Lake stock, which is part of the Texas Creek system, which is the main driver for like KSM to the north of us. Seabridge's KSM, Pretium's Bruce Jack mine, SCOT to the south. It's the intrusive suite to be in the area, and that's just a couple hundred meters off of both the Scotty gold mine and this blueberry target that we're working.
And presumably the guys in the 1980s were Fats Domino fans. Because
they were, pardon me?
Fats Domino fans.
Because the dominoes?
The Domino Target and Blueberry Hill, and
yeah.
I expect if you could kind of go through some of their other names, you'll probably dig out some other Fats Domino was it Fats Domino who sang on Blueberry Hill? No, it wasn't.
I'm not sure about that. Domino, I think we had a lot of targets over there. They were named after Van Morrison songs. I think they're kind of different. Yeah.
I found my freedom. Was it on Blueberry Hill? I found my freedom on Blueberry Hill.
I'll have to look it up.
I think it was Fats Domino. Anyway, digression. So tell me more about the Summit Lake stock and the kind of the regional geological context. What kinds of systems are these? Is it structure related or lithology? Here you're talking about kind of lithological controls linked to structure.
Yep.
Is the mineralization in this area kind of in this kind of in the neighborhood kind of broadly related?
There's a lot of variation. You've got KSM, which is a large porphyry system. You've got Bruce Jack, which is a high-grade epithermal system. You've got SK, which is a VMS. You've got the SNP mine, which is kind of our closest analog to Scotty. And Scotty itself is, obviously with all the pyrrhotite, it's a reduced system compared to some of these others. It's more intrusion related. We've got these major crustal scale plumbing systems and the right intrusive phases in the area. But there's a wide variation in the deposit style. You've also got Galore Creek, which is a silica undersaturated alkaline deposit. And these are all within like 50 to 100 kilometers of each other. And it's just an incredibly endowed area, but there's a lot of variation in the deposit models that you're after.
Have you done petrography and kind of some basic kind of mineralogical work looking at the petrogenesis and
Yeah, we've got 2 master's students working on that right now, looking at the detailed petrography of comparing Scotty to blueberry and seeing what the relationship is between those two. They're basically on either side of this major north-south structure, and we're kind of figuring out what's their relative vertical positions and laterals in a lateral sense. Like, is there a zonation pattern that we can use to identify other targets in the area.
Sorry, could you just orientate me between Scotty and Blueberry? Have you got a map that can kind of show where they are geographically? Blueberry is kind of potentially a kilometer long. Is that kind of roughly what I'm hearing?
Yeah, or well, I mean it's open now. So if you look at this map here, this is the road to Ascot coming up here, this dark black line. You've got Blueberry that's just off of the road. And what we've extended now, just based on our drilling, is 700 meters. But we follow that contact under the lake bed, and it basically dives under the lake bed, and we lose it. But we can extend it for another 400 meters to the south of that. So we've got that kilometer pinned down for a kilometer in length, or sorry, that contact pinned down for a kilometer in length.
Could you show me with your mouse what you've just been talking about? So can you just show me where the lake bed sediments are with your mouse?
Yeah. So this is the lake
on
here.
That map. Hang on, I can't see it.
I'm just going to go back to it, another photo, and you can.
Okay.
So here is Scotty looking at it from the ground, from the major road. You've got Blueberry up at the valley end on the right-hand side, and you can see the lake bed is actually drained away. You can see the vegetation line up there on the right or the left-hand side.
Okay.
So the lake used to be up to that level when the mine operated in the 80s. And now it's since drained because there's a glacier just off screen to the left that pulled back and allowed the glacier lake to completely evacuate. And so now the lake bed is accessible.
The drainage is to the left of the picture.
Exactly. Yeah. And so the Blueberry zone up here is basically striking straight along there under this lake bed.
Okay. So it comes down past the A portal, past the tailings towards
we lose the contact under here, under these sediments. And then the Scottie gold mine here is in the center of the screen. So these are 3 portals to access this underground mine. The mill for the mine was actually built underground. So there's a cavern about a couple hundred meters into the 2,800 foot portal, which is where the mill operated out of.
Okay. So that was presumably weather related, So,
So you didn't have to worry about the snow load or any avalanche risk during the winter time.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So interesting. So the Blueberry zone and the way it extends down the valley is a topographic low, and the Scottie zone is a different style. It's a different style of mineralization. Is it more vein related, or are you seeing the same kind of things? It's
more vein related. It is, it's in the middle of the mountain here. It's much more structurally controlled. Those veins, we don't have that lithological contrast. It's in this undifferentiable package of volcanic rocks. It doesn't seem to have any lithological control. It's primarily structure that controls the distribution of the vein sets in the Scottie gold mine.
In the coming season, where are you putting your meters? Which gets the focus?
So Blueberry will get the focus this year. That's just, we've been advancing very quickly there. We've got fantastic drill targets. Globally, we're planning a 15,000 meter drill program, and of which probably about 12,000 will go into Blueberry alone. It's also our cheapest drilling because we are off the road. We can use like a skid-based drill, so we don't need a helicopter to operate there. When we drill Scotty or some of our other more exploration targets, we need a helicopter just to kind of bump off the road to build a pad and to set up the machine.
Yeah. Okay. That makes perfect sense. So it's not only is it got enticing geology, but it's got easier access.
Yeah. And being at the valley bottom, we can access it earlier and later in the season. So it has a longer season. So, and we've been pretty fortunate. Last year, we acquired an SGS mobile prep lab, or we're able to use one up at site. So we're able to have quicker turnaround. So the holes that we drilled at the start of the year in 2021, we were able to receive the results back and then drill off those results. And so that's a huge win for us and anybody working in the Golden Triangle to be able to drill off of results in the same season.
About 12,000 meters going into the Blueberry zone. You're going to be testing it to the south. Will you be going up to the lake bed, and presumably with your ability to do the sample prep and get assay turnaround, you might, you've got discretion in there to be able to flex your program. You've drilled the easy bits from the road. Does that mean you're going to have to get in between with skids and kind of bulldozers to kind of fill in the gaps?
Yeah, it's not so much a challenge in terms of drilling. It was just, where do you drill first? You drill where something's there. And so we drilled those spots first. Now, we've got 100 meters in between them. It's easy to design a hole to go in between them. And we have a really good control on where we expect that contact to be now.
Is the kind of the mineralogy consistent across the strike that you've just defined so far, across the 700 meters? Do you now know do your geologists now know when they're coming into the zone because they can pick up the chloritization or the kind of the intensity of alteration or whatever it is? Have you got your eyes keyed in, and is it consistent?
Yeah, identifying the contact is very consistent across there. The contact itself is usually 1.5 meters, 2 meters wide, like the pure contact right between the andesite and the siltstone. But mineralization, obviously, with the intercepts that you see, extends well outside of that zone as well. We've taken the approach to just sampling top to bottom on all of these holes because we get surprised every once in a while, but it's very easy to see when we make that contact between the andesite and siltstone. And so usually extend 20 meters into the siltstone and then shut down the hole, unless we see some other favorable veining that seems to extend out from the andesite into the siltstone.
What are your kind of indicators? Let's say you've hit a 35 meter wide intercept at one point.
Yes.
When you go back and you log that core with the results in your hand, you go, oh look, there's X, or what are the indicators that kind of show you that you're starting that zone?
So you get this really black, dark chloritization. You get disseminated pyrite and pyrrhotite in little veinlets associated in stringers with that. When you're getting closer to the contact itself, you're getting high intensity ceratization right at the contact, which obviously indicates a lot of fluid flow through that area. And as the rock quality improves, you're getting away from this alteration, this mineralization zone.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. When you can't tell what the rock is, that's the good spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you've got a good doubt whether it's a siltstone or an andesite because it's been overprinted.
Yeah.
And any indications so far on kind of grain size, kind of how the gold presents itself? Is it on microfractures? Is it kind of encapsulated in the pyrrhotite? Is it in the pyrite? Have you done any? I know you said you're doing the petrographic work at the moment, but have you had any kind of indication so far of where you are?
At Scotty, I have some sense, and I'm just about to get a report from the master's students at the end of the month here, where I'm going to get a better sense of what they've actually discovered at Blueberry. But at Scotty, it was all very, very fine grained gold associated with the margins around pyrrhotite and pyrite, as well as in the quartz carbonate. It's very rare to see VG in these holes. So whenever we've only seen it at Scotty, I think twice, and at Blueberry, we've actually hit it a few times at the north end of our structure there. When we started getting like the 36 grams over almost 12 meters, we started seeing VG pretty regularly. But it basically requires us to have over 100 grams per ton in grade before we start seeing VG in these samples. So it's a great sign when we see VG. It's not, but very fine grained, well disseminated gold associated with sulfide seems to be the trademark for Scotty.
Okay, well, that'll be an interesting report when you get that back. To me, it sounds as if kind of all the upside this year is going to come from Blueberry. Scotty's got potential. It sounds slightly harder. It sounds as if there's a mineralized system there, but you're going to go for the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, because Blueberry's wide open and it needs drilling. Yeah,
I mean, one of the advantages of Scotty, though, if you look at Scotty, is historically it produced 16.2 grams a ton, and that was the recovered grade. If you look in the tailings, we've done quite a bit of sampling in the tailings. There's about 2.2 grams a ton in the tailings we've taken over 100 samples. So the head grade for the mine was between 18 and 20 grams a ton when it operated. If you look at other mines in the area that are operating similar underground mines like Ascot, I think they're going to be having 3 or 4 different mines operating. The cutoff grade that they're using is 3 to 4 grams. And when Scotty operated, it was 10 grams. So if you take the existing drill database at Scotty and you drop the cutoff grade from 10 grams down to 3 or 4, there ends up being this huge mineralized halo around the existing ore body. So kind of a big chunk of the work at Scotty's already been done for us. Just reinterpreting the old data and doing QA/QC and validating the old holes. I mean, you can come up with a resource that goes around Scotty just on that. The upside for us in drilling is drilling big holes way away from that at Scotty. So that's kind of what we're doing, looking for bigger shoots. But at the same time, Blueberry's just on a per meter basis is just so much more prospective for us. It's at surface, it's on a road, and it's cheaper to drill. Are
you going to do that wraparound study? You're going to kind of reinterpret the Scotty data? Because surely that would be kind of a valuable exercise, even if it's a desktop study or low input study?
Yeah, so we've done that in that low impact kind of desktop ballpark number just to kind of see where we're at. It's a non-compliant number at this point, but we now know what we need to do to make it a compliant resource. And then from that, we're looking at Blueberry, and then we're targeting something in excess of a million ounces before we go to drill these things off.
So across the two, or 1 million ounces each, is kind of
either or. Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy with 2 million. Like right now with Blueberry, I mean, our deepest hole hit 13 meters of 15 grams. Like, we don't know how deep it goes. There's no limitation at depth on this. It's a very near vertical structure that we're targeting. So we're going to push it down at depth and then along strike. And so, I mean, you can easily see something that's over 1 million ounces just at Blueberry with, we can put a framework, like a skeleton together, that's going to show that we have that pathway there. And then Blueberry or Scotty is an add-on to that, just based on the historic drilling alone.
Contact between the siltstone and the andesite isn't going to end at a cross-cutting fault. It might be displaced, but logically one would expect that there's that this is a regional feature. Or
yes, yeah,
maybe not even a regional feature, but a kind of a relatively persistent local feature. So that should have also geological potential as well, or kind of
totally
exploration potential.
Depends on the timing of that faulting relative to the mineralization. So we're kind of investigating that. Where we have the offset, we've largely got it pinned down, and we have a great soil anomaly over top of it, but we haven't drill tested that yet. Like the northern extension of Blueberry, where the offset happens.
So Thomas, you were just saying that you're targeting kind of 400 meters as your depth extent as the kind of the target. So 50-meter step backs. And are you doing 100-meter line spacings? Effectively, are you systematically drilling this out now?
Yeah, I'd say we're systematically drilling it out. We are using the road, so we're limiting where we're putting pads just for ease of moving around. But we are trying to drill as perpendicular to the structure as possible, utilizing those structures. And yeah, 50-meter step downs along the structure is kind of what we're targeting to push it down to about 400 meters depth this year.
Great. And just if we block it out in kind of quarters, so we're in the start of we're in the second quarter at the moment, and the second half of the year coming through. Can you just kind of give me an indication of when you get started with the drilling, when you expect your first assays back, and just kind of give me some shape to the year? That'd be quite useful.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the week here, I'm going up and we're going to do a relog program on some of the bigger hits that we had this year and just kind of better understand the rocks that we had. And then we're aiming to start drilling in mid-June this year. And basically first assays are kind of expected in early to mid-August this year. And then we'll have continuous news flow, I expect, until December, January in terms of drilling results coming out, if the labs kind of are consistent with what we had last year.
Great. Well, good luck. What fun. It sounds really exciting. It's just the kind of stuff I like.
Great. Thanks, Merlin. Thanks for having us.